Hello and welcome to a special series on FP Live, America Votes, What It Means for the World. I'm Ravi Agrawal, the editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy. Every day this week, we are going to drop a new episode exploring how the two presidential candidates, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, agree or disagree on policy towards a particular region. And today we're starting off with a region in turmoil, the Middle East. For years now, US foreign policy leaders have looked to decrease their involvement in the Middle East and instead look further east. The idea of the pivot to Asia, an idea that was announced by President Obama in November 2011, was previewed a month earlier by then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in an essay in Foreign Policy. And yet, as we all know, the Middle East keeps pulling the United States back in. The current Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has made 11 trips to the region in the last 12 months. We all know why, as Iran and Israel remain perilously close to all-out war. In the coming days, we will explore what we know about Trump and Harris's prospective foreign policies and how they might impact Europe, Africa, Latin America, and Asia. But today, we start with the Middle East. I have two excellent guests with me. Stephen Cook is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and the author of, most recently, The End of Ambition. He's also a columnist at FP. And Sanam Vakil is the director of the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. Like Stephen, she's been on this program before. Sanam, Stephen, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you both on. Stephen, let me start with you. Broad strokes in the Middle East, where do Trump and Harris have similar approaches? Where might they be different?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you'd be surprised to know that I get that question almost every day now. And it's also surprising when you dig a little deeper into things beyond our headlines, beyond our polarized politics, that at a level of abstraction, President Trump and Vice President Harris's positions on a variety of important issues in the Middle East, whether it's the two-state solution, whether it is U.S. policy towards Iran, whether it is regarding human rights and promotion of democratic reform in the region, are not all that different from each other. On the two-state solution, they have obviously very different visions of what that two-state solution would look like if you go based on what President Trump's deal of the century was that he tabled during his one term in office. But nevertheless, they're both supportive of a two-state solution to bring the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians to an end. President Trump was often bellicose about Iran, but his bellicosity hid the fact that what he was most interested in was putting pressure on the Iranians to bring them back to the negotiating table so that he can negotiate a better deal than the JCPOA. And at critical moments when it seemed like military force against Iran was called for, he decided not to use military force. The administration that Vice President Harris has served has, for the first 2.5 years, sought to draw the Iranians back into a JCPOA or some new deal that would put limits on Iran's nuclear program. So on those big issues, there may be a difference in style, a difference in rhetoric, but the ultimate policy goal of both candidates seems to me very much the same.
Sanam, I'm wondering if you can build on that, whether you agree. But it strikes me as well that Iran could be an area of emerging difference. I mean, in Washington, there's a bit of a debate going on about how exactly to use this current moment. There's, in some quarters, a school of thought that goes that Iran is weak, and Israel and the United States should try and deal with its, nuclear program once and for all. There is, of course, a school of thought that disagrees with that.
Thank you, Ravi. I very much agree with Stephen's picture that he painted. There is much more alignment in terms of the end game for both President Trump or Harris administration. But of course, it's the approach and the tone that very much matters, particularly on Iran. I think it's important to pick apart what the intentions are, but build out what actually could be done. I think Iran is going to be one of the big crisis points for the next U.S. president. It certainly is a growing pressure point for Europe and the UK. And obviously, with the war in Gaza and Lebanon potentially spreading to Iran, this is coming to a head. There has long been a debate in Washington about regime change or trying to change the regime. And this might seem like a moment for perhaps some more hawkish US policymakers, but the reality is that neither candidate is attracted to the process of regime change, which we saw play out very negatively for the United States in 2003 in the Iraq War and the subsequent 20-year investment that by many accounts in Washington, but globally, didn't pay off and has facilitated US deprioritization away from the Middle East. Regime change in Iran, of course, sounds like a dream. It could solve all of the regional problems. It could perhaps restore a balance of power, diplomatic ties between two states that have been adversarial for 46 years almost. But executing that regime change in a country that is 85 million in terms of population, but also without a real clear plan of what comes next, I think is something that we really have to draw a line under and acknowledge that in 2024, 2025, the United States isn't going to support that strategy or back any other country that thinks that's a viable option. And nobody is saying that out loud because many people around President Trump have that ambition and would like to, in addition to perhaps ratcheting up more sanctions on Iran in order to bring them back to the negotiating table, would also like to throw more support to the Iranian people. So if the United States doesn't regime change in Iran, perhaps the Iranian people will do it instead.